I, 25M, never imagined I would end up sharing my story on Reddit, but the events of the past few years have left me with no choice. It all began when my mom married Robert, 52M, 5 years ago. I was 20 then, working at a promising tech startup that developed mobile apps. I had a girlfriend, Sarah, 19F, whom I met during my first year of college. She was studying psychology, and we connected instantly over our shared love of indie music and horror movies. Life seemed perfect. I was making good money, had a loving girlfriend, and was steadily saving up to move out on my own. My mom met Robert at a charity event where she was volunteering. He came across as the perfect gentleman, successful real estate developer, well-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested in making our family work. They dated for a year before getting married in a small ceremony. I was happy for my mom. After raising me alone since I was 12, she deserved someone who could give her a good life. Robert had a son from his previous marriage, James, 22M at the time. From day one, there was tension between us. James had dropped out of college and was living at home, supposedly working on various business ideas that never materialized. He would constantly try to one-up me in everything. If I helped mom with groceries, he would spend the whole day reorganizing the pantry. If I talked about my job, he would interrupt with grandiose plans about his future business empire. I mostly ignored his behavior and focused on my relationship with Sarah. We had been together for 2 years, and things were getting serious. We spent most weekends together, either studying at cafes or binge-watching shows at my place. We had even started looking at apartments online, planning to move in together once we had enough savings. Sarah got along well with my mom, and I thought she was the one I would spend my life with. Everything changed after our family barbecue in summer. Robert insisted on having regular family gatherings to bond, and this was our third one. James met Sarah there for the first time. I noticed him staring at her throughout the evening, especially when she was helping mom in the kitchen. Sarah was wearing a blue sundress that day, I remember, because she had just bought it for her cousin's wedding. James kept finding reasons to be wherever she was, offering to help with dishes, asking about her studies, laughing too hard at her jokes. After that day, living with James became unbearable. Whenever Sarah visited, he would emerge from his room and plant himself in the living room. He started texting her about random things, asking for book recommendations since she was into psychology, seeking advice about his non-existent girlfriend's problems, or sharing memes. At first, Sarah would show me these messages, saying how James was just being friendly and needed someone to talk to. The red flags were there, but I was too trusting. James started working out at the same gym Sarah went to. He began dressing differently, buying clothes similar to my style. He even got the same haircut as me. Looking back, he was trying to become my replacement right under my nose. One Tuesday, I came home early because a client meeting got cancelled. I found Sarah and James in our living room, sitting closer than friends should, their heads bent over his phone. They jumped apart when they saw me. Sarah claimed she was helping James with his dating profile. I confronted her later that night, but she turned it around on me, saying I was being possessive and that James was like a brother to her. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. Around this time, I was saving up for an engagement ring. I had been putting away money from every paycheck for months, planning to propose on our 3rd anniversary. I kept track of my savings through a budgeting app, watching the numbers grow each month. Then one day, I noticed something odd. There were withdrawals I hadn't made. At first, I thought it was a bank error. But when I checked the transaction history, I found multiple withdrawals over the past 2 months, always on days when I was at work and James was home alone. The total amount missing was $15,000, my entire savings for the ring and our future apartment. I was devastated. When I confronted James, he didn't even try to deny it at first. He just smirked and asked me to prove it was him. Then, before I could gather any evidence, he went to his dad with an outrageous claim that I had stolen $10,000 from him. James spun an elaborate story about how he'd been saving money from odd jobs and online trading to start his own business. He claimed he kept the cash in his room because he didn't trust banks. Robert, who always favored his son, believed him immediately. The situation got worse when James produced bank statements showing transfers from his account to mine. They looked real enough to convince Robert and, to my shock, even my mom. The final blow came when Sarah broke up with me through a text message. She wrote that she couldn't believe I would steal from my own family, that she had seen signs of my greed before but had ignored them. A week later, I was walking to the parking lot after work when I saw them at the cafe across the street. Sarah was wearing the promise ring I had given her on our 2nd anniversary, but she was holding James's hand, laughing at something he was saying. They kissed, and my whole world shattered. Everything made sense, the texting, the gym, the friendly chats. They had been seeing each other behind my back for months. That evening, Robert confronted me in front of everyone. He demanded I return James's money or he would call the police. I tried showing him my bank records, proving that money had been stolen from me first, but he wouldn't listen. My own mother, who had raised me to be honest, now looked at me with doubt in her eyes. Robert gave me 24 hours to return the money or move out. I packed my things that night while my mom cried in her room. My college friend Marcus let me crash on his couch until I could figure things out. The next few months were tough. I worked overtime at my regular job and picked up freelance projects on the side. I cut off all contact with my family and blocked Sarah on everything. The betrayal was too deep to even consider maintaining any relationships. Looking back now, losing everything became the motivation I needed. I channeled all my anger and pain into work. Within a year, I had saved enough to start my own software development company. We specialize in security applications, ironic given how my trust was betrayed. The company has grown beyond my expectations, and we now have clients across the country. Update 1, it's been 3 weeks since my original post blew up, and I need to share some shocking revelations that have come to light. A guy named Mike reached out to me through Reddit after seeing my post. Turns out he used to be James's close friend during the time all this happened, and what he told me made me realize that the betrayal was even worse than I thought. Mike and I met at a coffee shop last weekend. He looked nervous and kept checking his phone, saying he was worried James might find out about our meeting. According to Mike, James had been plotting to steal both my girlfriend and my money for months before he actually did it. It wasn't some impulsive decision or a case of falling in love with Sarah, it was a calculated plan to destroy my life. Mike showed me text messages from their group chat dating back to several months before the theft. James would brag about how he was going to take everything from me, saying things like I didn't deserve what I had. He was jealous of my job, my savings, and especially my relationship with Sarah. There were messages where he outlined his strategy to get close to her, describing how he would play the role of a caring friend while slowly poisoning her mind against me. The manipulation was elaborate. James created a whole narrative about me that he fed to Sarah. He told her I was talking badly about her to my coworkers, claiming he overheard me making fun of her career choices and saying she wasn't smart enough for me. He invented stories about me having a gambling problem, showing Sarah fake betting slips he had created. He even went as far as making up stories about me pressuring other girls at work for dates. But it gets worse. The bank statements James used to frame me? Mike admitted he helped create them using Photoshop. He worked at a print shop at the time and had access to high-quality scanning and printing equipment. They spent hours making sure the documents looked authentic, even using paper from the same bank. Mike says he feels guilty about his role in everything and offered to come clean to my family, but I told him not to bother. I've moved on and built a better life for myself. Mike also revealed something that made my blood boil. James had been secretly recording our conversations for months. He would start arguments with me when no one else was around, deliberately provoking me, then edit the recordings to make it sound like I was admitting to stealing from him. He had dozens of these manipulated audio clips ready to use if I ever tried to defend myself. The most painful revelation was about Sarah's role in all this. She wasn't just an innocent victim of James's manipulation, she was an active participant. Mike showed me screenshots of conversations between James and Sarah where they discussed their plans in detail. Sarah was the one who suggested making me look financially irresponsible to my family. She knew about the fake bank statements and even helped create the narrative about my supposed gambling problem. The betrayal went even deeper. Sarah had given James access to my phone multiple times when I wasn't around. She knew my passcode because I trusted her completely. They used this access to get into my banking apps and gather information about my accounts. Sarah also installed some kind of tracking app on my phone so they would know when I was coming home early from work. The money they stole from me, my entire savings for our future, went straight into funding their secret relationship. While I was working overtime and taking on extra projects to save for an engagement ring, they were using my money to take weekend trips to luxury resorts. Mike showed me their Instagram stories from those days, which they had hidden from me using Instagram's close friends feature. There were pictures of them at expensive restaurants, staying at high-end hotels, Sarah wearing new designer clothes that I had assumed were gifts from her parents. What makes me sick is remembering how Sarah would talk about saving money and being careful with expenses when she was with me. She would suggest we eat at home instead of going out, saying we needed to save for our future. All while she was spending my money with James behind my back. The final twist came yesterday when my mom left another voicemail. She was crying, saying she misses me and wants to make things right. She mentioned that Robert has been distant lately, and she's starting to see cracks in his perfect facade. Part of me wants to send her all the evidence Mike provided, show her just how thoroughly her stepson deceived everyone. But another part of me wants to leave it all in the past. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, and dragging up all this pain again might not be worth it. Mike offered to help me expose everything, but I declined. I told him I appreciate him coming clean, but I don't want to get involved in their lives again. The betrayal runs too deep, and no amount of exposure or revenge would undo the pain they caused. Besides, I'm focused on growing my company now, and success is the best revenge. Update 2. 3 months have passed since my last update, and the situation has taken several unexpected turns. I found out through a mutual friend, Ashley, that James and Sarah got married in a rushed ceremony last month. Ashley attended the wedding and told me it was a far cry from the lavish celebration Sarah used to dream about when we were together. Instead of the beach resort wedding she had always wanted, it was a quick ceremony at the local courthouse followed by a reception at a budget hotel. Ashley said the whole thing felt desperate rather than romantic. James spent most of the reception moving from table to table, trying to network with the wealthier guests. He was pitching his latest business idea, something about cryptocurrency trading, and practically begging for investors. Sarah, meanwhile, was showing off an expensive engagement ring, which Ashley later found out was bought entirely on credit. According to Ashley, their financial situation is dire. James lost his job at his father's company 3 months ago after several costly mistakes with client accounts. Robert finally realized his son wasn't as competent as he pretended to be. Sarah's shopping addiction, which I had no idea about during our relationship, has apparently spiraled out of control. She's maxed out multiple credit cards buying designer clothes and luxury items, often returning them for store credit to buy more things. Last week, completely out of the blue, James showed up at my office. My receptionist tried to turn him away, but he made such a scene that I agreed to see him for 5 minutes. I barely recognized him. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his hair was unwashed, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He looked nothing like the arrogant, polished guy who had stolen my life 5 years ago. James broke down as soon as he sat down. Between sobs, he confirmed everything Mike had told me was true. He admitted to planning the whole thing with Sarah, stealing my money, and deliberately destroying my relationship with my family. But that wasn't why he came to see me. The real reason for his visit was even more shocking. Sarah has apparently developed a serious gambling addiction that started right after their wedding. She began small, playing poker on her phone, but it escalated quickly to online casinos and sports betting. To fund her addiction, she started stealing money from the accounting firm where she works. She would manipulate the books, diverting client payments to her personal accounts. Their situation reached a breaking point last week when her employer discovered the theft. The amount she stole is substantial, over $50,000. Her company gave her an ultimatum: either repay the entire amount within a month, or they would press criminal charges. On top of this, Sarah is 3 months pregnant. James spent an hour in my office, crying and begging for help. He offered to sign a legal document admitting to stealing from me years ago, promising to tell our parents the whole truth about what happened. He even pulled out his phone to show me their mounting bills and final notice letters from credit card companies. The amount they need to save Sarah from criminal charges is exactly double what they stole from me back then. James tried to frame this as some kind of cosmic justice. If I helped them now, they would pay me back double what they took. He even suggested I could take pleasure in watching them be indebted to me for years. I sat there listening to him, remembering all the nights I spent on Marcus's couch, working multiple jobs to rebuild my life after they destroyed it. I thought about my mom's tears when I left home, about the years of family relationships ruined by their lies. James looked at me with desperate eyes, probably expecting the same understanding and forgiveness I used to show back when we were stepbrothers. Sarah called me later that night from an unknown number. She was hysterical, begging me to at least think about helping them. She mentioned the baby, saying she couldn't bear the thought of giving birth in prison. She claimed she had changed, that she regretted everything she had done to me, and that she thinks about me every day. The same lies she used to tell when we were together, just with higher stakes now. I've spent the last week thinking about what to do. The evidence of their theft of company funds sits in my email, sent by James in his desperation to prove how serious their situation is. Part of me wants to forward it all to Sarah's employer, while another part wants to just continue ignoring their existence like I have for the past 5 years. Update 3, it's been 4 months since James came begging to my office, and I wanted to share what happened. After careful consideration, I decided not to give them the money. Instead, I forwarded all the evidence James had sent me, along with the details Mike had provided about their previous theft, to Sarah's employer. Some might call it revenge, but I saw it as justice. They needed to face the consequences of their actions for once. Sarah's company still pressed charges, but the information I provided helped them build a stronger case. She was arrested 2 weeks later. During the investigation, they discovered she had stolen closer to $75,000, not the $50,000 she claimed. She's now facing serious charges for embezzlement and fraud. James finally told our parents the truth, but only after everything fell apart. He confessed to stealing my money, creating fake evidence, and deliberately destroying my relationship with the family. But his confession wasn't out of guilt. He only came clean because he needed a place to stay after they got evicted from their apartment. Robert sent me a text message apology that read more like a legal disclaimer than genuine remorse. I apologize for believing James over you. It was a mistake on my part. My mom has been calling and texting constantly, begging me to consider some kind of family reconciliation. She keeps saying that Sarah and James have suffered enough, that with the baby coming we should try to be a family again. She even suggested that helping Sarah avoid prison would be the noble thing to do, especially since I'm financially successful now. I blocked her number after that last message. Sarah's parents have completely cut her off. They refused to help with her legal fees after learning about the embezzlement. According to Ashley, they were already suspicious about the circumstances surrounding our breakup years ago, and this confirmed their worst fears about their daughter. James and Sarah had to move back in with Robert. James is now working at a fast food restaurant, trying to save money for Sarah's legal defense. Sarah is under house arrest while awaiting her court date, wearing an ankle monitor and prohibited from accessing any devices with internet capabilities due to her gambling addiction. My mom showed up at my office last week, crying about how Sarah is struggling with her pregnancy while under house arrest. She tried to guilt-trip me by saying that my future niece or nephew shouldn't have to be born with their mother in prison. I had security escort her out. Robert attempted to reach out through my company's business email, suggesting we could handle things privately if I withdrew my statement to Sarah's employer. I had my lawyer send him a cease and desist letter. Some of my relatives have been posting on social media about how I'm being cruel and unforgiving, but they don't know the whole story. As for me, my company has expanded to 3 new cities in the past year. I recently got engaged to Emma, who I met at a tech conference 2 years ago. She knows my whole story and understands why I keep my distance from my family. We're planning a destination wedding next spring, and no, my family won't be receiving invitations. Some people might think I'm being harsh and not helping them, especially with a baby involved. But I believe they're finally facing the consequences of their own choices. Their current situation isn't my responsibility, and pregnancy isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for fraud. I've blocked everyone except my mom, though I rarely respond to her messages. She still sends emotional texts about family forgiveness and second chances, but I've learned that sometimes the best response is no response at all. The company is thriving, I'm happily engaged, and I've found that success truly is the best revenge.